Most people are not choosing between two solutions, they're choosing between two expectations. On one side, apple cider vinegar is seen as a simple, natural shortcut. On the other, fat burn supplements promise faster, more targeted results. Both are often used with the same goal: to lose weight with less effort. But the real question is not which one is stronger. It's whether either one is solving the actual problem. This matters because many people follow routines that seem logical, but don't produce consistent results. A tablespoon of vinegar in the morning or a capsule before a workout feels like action, feels structured. But in many cases, the underlying system that drives fat loss is still unclear or incomplete. The problem starts with how fat loss is usually framed. People tend to isolate one variable and expect it to carry the entire process. They look for a single input that creates a noticeable output. That's where both apple cider vinegar and fat burners become appealing. They represent simple, repeatable actions. Apple cider vinegar is often associated with appetite control, digestion, and blood sugar regulation. Some people report feeling less hungry or more stable throughout the day. But the effect is typically subtle. It doesn't force the body to burn fat. It may slightly influence how you feel, which can indirectly affect how much you eat. Fat burn supplements, on the other hand, are designed to increase energy expenditure, usually through stimulants or compounds that raise body temperature slightly. This is often referred to as thermogenesis. In theory, this means your body burns more calories even at rest. But again, the effect is usually modest. And in many cases, the body adapts over time. So now you have two tools that seem different but share a similar limitation. Neither one directly addresses the structure of your daily energy balance. They operate on the edges of the system, not at its core. To understand why this matters, you have to look at how fat loss actually happens in a practical sense. Your body is constantly balancing energy, what comes in and what goes out. This includes not only exercise but also daily movement, digestion, and even how your body responds to food. If your daily structure is inconsistent, small additions like vinegar or supplements won't correct that. For example, if someone takes a fat burner but becomes less active later in the day due to fatigue or overstimulation, the net effect may be close to zero. The same applies to appetite control. If reduced hunger in the morning leads to overeating later, the benefit disappears. This is where many routines break down. The focus stays on inputs, not outcomes. People measure what they take, not how their behavior changes over time. A more useful way to compare apple cider vinegar and fat burners is to ask a different question. How do they influence behavior across a full day? Apple cider vinegar may help create a slightly more controlled eating pattern for some people. It's simple, low effort, and easy to maintain. But it requires consistency in other areas to have any meaningful impact. Fat burners may increase alertness and short-term activity, especially when combined with exercise. But they can also disrupt sleep, increase tolerance, or create reliance if used without a broader plan. Neither one is inherently ineffective. The issue is context. When used without a structured system, both tend to produce small, inconsistent results. The key insight is that fat loss is not driven by isolated actions, it's driven by patterns. What you do repeatedly throughout the day has a much larger impact than any single addition to your routine. If you look at people who maintain consistent fat loss over time, their approach is rarely built around one tool. Instead, it's based on stable habits, predictable meals, regular movement, manageable activity levels, and a clear understanding of how their body responds. In that context, something like apple cider vinegar can be a minor support, not a solution. A fat burner can be a temporary tool, not a foundation. The difference is subtle but important. When you treat these as primary drivers, you expect them to compensate for everything else. When you treat them as secondary elements, you use them to support a system that already works. This shift in thinking removes a lot of confusion. It changes the question from which one is better to where does this fit in my overall structure. Once that becomes clear, decisions become easier. You're no longer looking for a shortcut, you're refining a process. In practical terms, this means focusing first on consistency. How stable is your daily routine? How predictable is your energy intake? How much movement do you maintain outside of workouts? These factors create the baseline that determines whether any additional tool will have an effect. Only after that does it make sense to evaluate smaller inputs. And even then, the expectation should be realistic. Small tools create small changes. Large results come from repeated behavior. In the end, the comparison between apple cider vinegar and fat burners is less about effectiveness and more about placement. Both can exist within a structured system, but neither replaces it. If you're trying to make sense of your current approach, start by looking at the bigger picture. Identify where your routine is inconsistent or unclear. Then decide whether adding something actually improves that structure or just adds complexity. If this breakdown helped you see the process more clearly, consider subscribing for more structured explanations like this. And if you want to go deeper, there's a useful reference in the description that outlines how these elements fit into a complete daily system.